Hello everyone. We're now on week 3 and today I'm demonstrating the painting of a white rose using a loose and free technique, which means that I must endeavour to allow the paint some freedom and avoid too much detail. Nice white rose, but quite a complicated one insofar as it has so many petals which are actually quite curled up. So what I'm actually going to do, I've got a similar one in front of me, slightly bigger one, but looking very, very similar. So what I'm going to do is just use it for inspiration and shape and allow myself to create the shape and the petals in the way that I feel might look better. So when painting a white flower, we don't use white paint. We allow the paper to be the white and we look into the flowers and see whatever colour we can and shadows and just paint those. But actually keeping a nice white light edge, outer edge, is helpful if you're going to put a background on, because that helps to keep the white. But don't be afraid to be reasonably strong with any white flower that you paint with the shadows and colours, because in fact you see a lot of colour in a white flower. These are the colours I'm going to use, and I've mixed up some unusual colours together, Viridian and Cobalt Violet to make a cool grey, and Windsor Orange Red Shade and Ultramarine Blue to make a warmer grey. And so I'll see how it goes with those. Can't see much of a centre at all, but I'll probably make a little bit more of the centre. Don't know if this is green fly, I do hope not. So I'll try and make a little bit more of the centre, because it's either dropped out or wasn't there in the first place, I'm not sure. But I think I'm going to start with the centre. I haven't had time actually today to create a sketch, but I would suggest that you try to do that, okay? Just to loosen yourselves up and to see how the paint is going to go down for you, and if you leave it you'll discover that it's going to make nice marks for you. So I'm actually just going to put a few little stamens in the centre and work out from there. Working quite wet, and I can come back to that if I need to. Right, so if you mix these two colours together, having them both in one little section of your palette, you're going to get variety, which is something I'm quite keen on trying to get today. There is a little tinge of pink as well, I've noticed. So I'll have to try and maybe put a little bit of that colour in. But I'm quite happily touching the centre and allowing that to blend away. Starting from the centre actually and working out. And you do often find that painting this kind of more open flower will just grow and grow and get bigger and bigger, so keep an eye on that. These are very, very pointy petals. The rose isn't out, that bush isn't doing what it normally does. This year it's the petals have come very, very plentiful and not too many roses, but in fact the ones that I have got, I've got double and triple and many petals in the one flower, which is something of a disappointment. They weren't quite like that last year. They were more single, which I found people could paint more easily. So I'm actually just going to drop little bits of pink just through the centre where I see more pink. As it gets further out towards the outer edge, it's less colourful. But working quite wet and allowing these colours to mingle and move around. So I'm going to try and paint negatively on some of these outer petals, creating the shadows between the petals. So I'm looking at the shape of each petal now and painting around the edge of it. This is a darker side, so I can actually try for a bit more shadow over here. You mustn't be afraid to allow the paint and the water lots of freedom to float around. Trying to vary the shadows a little bit to get variety. Lots of shadow in there actually, there really is. Quite like the way that's moved around. Right. Trying to use cooler shadows underneath here. A lot of shadow under here. So now I think I can make a stronger mix here and allow a bit more colour to create some background shapes for me. So you can choose your own colours to pop around your white flower, whichever flower you choose. You don't have to choose anything quite as complicated as a rose. There are other nice white flowers that might be simpler. For instance, if you could get hold of some white clematis, they have simpler shapes. I've got a lovely white Busy Lizzie, which I almost decided to paint, but then I thought I'd try something a bit more complicated. I like a challenge. So the beauty of having two colours sitting side by side and mixing them and varying the tones is always helpful. So totally not looking for accuracy particularly, but definitely trying to keep it loose, using lots of water. And if you find first time round it hasn't worked as well as you would like, don't be afraid to go again. I think I might get really dark under here. Quite like using these warmer colours for background for a change. And as I've said 100 times before, I won't know exactly what this is going to look like until such time as it dries. I like fiddling about with the middle and letting the centre just give a little bit more detail. And while it's still damp, have a little look and see if there's anywhere that you can just pop a few darker colours in, darker tones, because that's going to lighten the whole thing. But don't touch too much. I really haven't touched that too much at all. I've got a bud, so I may just try to create a bud. Right, let's have a look. The bud is actually quite pink, but I'm not going to necessarily be that pink with it. So turn your flowers around to make sure that you get the best side, or the side that inspires you most to paint. Mixing up my cool grey again. And do use a nice big brush, because that's going to stop you from fiddling. More depth of shadow here. So if you do actually draw a line when you're painting loosely this way without drawing, then do make sure that you wash that back in fairly quickly so that you don't get a hard edge. There's nothing worse than having a really hard line around your lovely soft paintings. And don't forget, you can lift off if you feel you've overdone the colour. Right, paint negatively around the edge of that. Hopefully I'm getting a bud shape. A few little petals showing at the top, but nothing much. So then if you take a stronger colour, you can create some nice background around. I'm not actually trying to create a picture today. I'm just trying out these colours and just painting this little bud and flower in a loose way without worrying too much about composition. So that's another way to start if you haven't done this before, or if you haven't done a sketch. Right, I need some green. So you can choose your background colours. It doesn't have to be a warm colour, it can be a cool colour. You can choose blue, whatever you feel is going to be right for you. not going to particularly worry about stalk on here. I can't see it anyway. I could see a stalk there. I could maybe just try to pop a little bit of leaf in maybe here. A colour I quite like to mix at the moment for the greens, especially if I'm using greys within the flower, is I've got sap green and Payne's grey for a change, and that sort of makes a lovely greeny grey. So I'm just indicating some leaf here in a nice loose way, and hoping that when it dries it's going to look good. Leaving white paper, maybe getting a little bit of yellow in there as well, just to give some nice variety into the leaves. Putting the central vein in first. Don't be afraid to drop water back in, make it looser still, create some blemishes, and just nice little loose marks. With your nice big brush. It's always a nice idea to pop back in some of the colour that you have going on either in the background or in your painting. So this is really what I would like you to do this week. Just play with the paint. Try to allow the accuracy to go. And just indicate, nice and loosely, a lovely white flower. Right, I don't need to really go any further with this background, I don't think. You can then go in at this point and create stronger areas at the back behind some of the petals to bring out the outer edges if you feel you'd like to, but keeping them lovely and light, as I said, actually works very well, and that helps to create the white of the flower. It's not dry, so maybe I'll just dry it off and see what it looks like when it's dry, and then you can see. Okay, so it's dry. It's not meant to be a completed picture by any means, but actually thinking about it and looking at it now in this little mount, it could be. There's the flower, so not too far out. Lots and lots of shadow in there, but I did give it a better centre, a more prominent centre, so think about things like that. Here's the bud, nice little bud. I'd like to paint that again, so that's something I might do. So just have a go this week at touching as little as you possibly can, especially if you're a beginner. Don't get bogged down with anything too complicated, and touch as little as possible. And when the paint is dry, you'll be very pleased with what you've done, and it will look better when it is dry, always. Any other tips I'll put on a separate sheet for you, but the main one, as usual, as I keep saying, is not to touch too much and allow the paint and the water the freedom until it's dry. When it's dry, you can go back and you can put a bit more in centres and maybe sort of behind and at the edges to show up the edges of white flowers. But it's not all about the detail. It's about capturing something nice and loosely and freely with lots of paint and water. So try to find a less complicated flower if you are a beginner. But if you're more experienced and you want to get more complicated, this is one I did earlier, but using those same colours, but stronger in the backgrounds and maybe in different ways. But that's something you can do if you're experienced and you've done this sort of thing with me before. So have a good week and enjoy being loose. Take care. Bye-bye.